Thank you for joining me today with Reading with Robin Brooks. I'm going to begin this story that is a chapter book, and it is a book that I read as a child, so it's a little old. The name of the story is Where the Lilies Bloom, and it is written by Vera and Bill Cleaver. We're going to try to read 2 chapters today if we can get in there. But the story revolves around the Great Smoky Mountains and a family that lives in the mountains with a 14-year-old girl who's trying to help take care of her family. It's a pretty tough life. They're orphaned, and she has a sister that has a little bit of special needs, and she's trying to protect her family from actually the world and people that try to take advantage of them. She's very tough and she's courageous, and I think that you all will enjoy this story as I enjoyed it many years ago. Where the Lilies Bloom. Once, in some near-forgotten time, a traveler making his way across these mountains on foot wandered onto our valley, which is known as Trial. Warm and dusty and overwearied, he came to our door. He eased his heavy pack and asked for refreshments, and Devola brought him a pail of water from our spring, pure and so cold. It made him clench his teeth. "Where have you been?" we asked. He raised a khaki arm and he pointed first to Sugar Boy that rises to our east, and then to old Joshua that lifts darkly to our west. "Up there." "What for?" "For the memory." Devola thought that was a funny answer. She laughed and she ran down into the yard and hid herself behind a flowering rhododendron, and she peered out at us as though it was a white lacy veil. I said, "Oh, don't pay her no mind. She's cloudy-headed." "Why did you say you had been up to Sugar Boy and old Joshua for the memory?" "That just not a real answer, is it?" "Yes," replied the traveler, "that was a real answer." "They're very beautiful now," I said, "because everything is in bloom. Trillium and sadbush and the violets and all the other spring beauties that we've just come through a terrible winter. There was snow 6 feet deep in this valley with drifts up to 10. Everything was frozen. We thought it would never thaw. Romy and I couldn't even get to school." "Well, who's Romy?" inquired the traveler. "He is my little brother. In the winter, when everything's frozen, I hate the mountains. They're very ugly." The traveler said, "Today at noon, I leaned my back against a cloud and I ate my lunch. And afterward, coming down the slopes, I saw a lake of blue flowers and then a long, wide scarf of deep maroon ones. This is a fair land, the fairest I have ever seen." I never saw that traveler again. An hour later, he disappeared into the mist that sometimes cover the valley in the spring. But I have never forgotten what he said, that this was a fair land, the fairest of them all. Like I say, Devola is cloudy-headed, and this is one thing I can't understand, because none of the rest of us Luthers is that way, but Devola, she sure is. So each day I have to explain the whole of our existence to her. Her confidence in my ability to do this is supreme, though there are 4 whole year age difference between us. She is 18 and I'm 14. Devola cannot remember twice around a gimlet. When we go of a morning to the lower slopes of old Joshua or Sugar Boy to gather witch hazel leaves, she always acts like she's never seen any of it before. "Look!" she exclaims. "Look at how pretty it all is. Don't you think it's pretty, Mary Call?" "Yes, it's pretty, but we haven't got the time to stand around and gawk now. Come on, Devola." "Oh, here we are. Here is where we left off yesterday. Aren't these leaves nice and thick? Shall we fill our bags first, or mine?" "First." Devola shook her bag open and she looked down into its emptiness. "It don't differ. Either way is just plain work." So she moved around to the north side of the witch hazel bush and she began snatching the smooth, wavy-toothed leaves from its limbs. "How many pounds did we get yesterday?" 3. "Now, Devola, don't put any twigs in. Just leaves." Devola fished out 2 twigs, and she discarded them. How much is that? Oh, about 45 cents, maybe. If that man at the drug company or Mr. Connell from the general store had to come out here and do this for just one morning, I'll bet it would be a sight more than that. People are stingy with money, aren't they, Mary Call? Yeah, some are. A lance of clear sunlight wavering through the overhanging boughs touched Devola's face and hair. She stepped back away from it, and she turned and looked across the valley. In the distance, Kaiser Peace, high on his tractor, was creating clouds of furious black dust. Between him and us, the lonesome fields were a bright, shimmering yellow. Devoler says, Kaiser wants to marry me again, but still Roy Luther says no. I told him it didn't differ to me one way or the other, but that's all he ever says is no. Devola, you don't know anything about marriage. Aren't you going to help me pick any more? Devola came back to the bush. Kaiser's got a nice house. I just love his kitchen. Everything in it's yellow. Of course, he doesn't keep it good, but I would. I would wash everything every day. You would, huh? Yes. I referred to one of Kaiser's superstitions. A keyhole opening he had near the top of his chimney as an exit for witches. I asked, would you wash his witch hole, too? Or would you plug it up so no more witches could get in or out? Devola smoothed her long cascade of glowing hair. I wouldn't bother that witch hole. His witches wouldn't bother me. I just love his house. Just think, all of us could live in it if I married Kaiser. You and Imogene and Romy and me and Roy Luther. All of us. Wouldn't that be nice? No, we like it where we are, Devola. Now, are you going to help me pick or aren't you? With a languishing look, Devola picked 2 leaves. Roy Luther owes Kaiser money. Yeah, well, he might get paid back someday. So, gently, Devola deposited 3 twigs. If Roy Luther was to give his say-so for me to marry Kaiser, Kaiser would forget about that money and give him 20 acres of land and the house we're living in. Roy Luther has already earned the land, Devola, 20 times or more over, and he might just as well give us the house that's falling down. Nobody else would have it. You don't like Kaiser, do you, Mary Call? No, I don't. Why? Because he is ignorant. Nobody but an ignorant person would have a witch's keyhole in his house, and he is an old greedy gut and a cheat. There isn't another man in this whole world would come in here and share crop for him the way Roy Luther has for so little. Just years and years of it. And when the time comes for tallying up, Kaiser always gets the hog share, and Roy Luther always having to settle for the least. Devola gazed at me. I wish you wouldn't be so mad at everybody all the time. It makes you ugly. Kaiser's lonesome, she offered. He told me how lonesome he really was. Yeah, well, it's his own fault. He hasn't got anybody. I've heard him brag about how he ran all of his kin off years ago. This bush is stripped clean, Devola. Let's now move on up a ways. The August sun, full now in the mid-morning, was warm on our bare heads. Far above us, Sugar Boy's spine loomed Black Creek. The air was richly peppered with the cool, sharp perfume of balsam and the soft, tepid scent of summer fresh vegetation. Deep in a tangle of wild honeysuckle, a Carolina junco thrilled his sweet belly song. Devola wears a look of suffering when she's made to come out on these work jaunts, but it's like no other suffering I've ever seen. It's tender, it's sly, and it's secret. We located a new fresh bush, and I took 1/2, and I assigned the other half to Devola, and immediately she moved around and she began plucking. But in a minute, she parted the branches and she looked at me through the wavy green light. Mary Call? What? I forgot my sack. I left it back yonder. For Devola, I have many fears, and I have others too. Some of our paternal parent, Roy Luther, and some for Imogene and Romy, and a few for myself also. They're not rash. They're not just things that happen to fritter into my mind because nothing else was there to busy it. They are really old fears with me. Oh, I feel it. This bottomless stomach of fright when I look at Devola and I see her so free and innocent, so womanly in form, but with a child's heart and a child's mind. I feel it when I watch Imogene and Romy at their make-believe games, so carefree they are with never a thought in their little heads as to how they're going to get decently raised. And when I look at Roy Luther, who is coughing his life away, we know now that it isn't just worms that turn him so white and panting weak, though we keep doctoring, laying out hope each time along with the salves and other medications. When the time comes, which he hopes will be in his sleep, I am to let him go on as quietly as he can, without any crying or any fussing. I am not to call any doctor or allow anyone else to call. If it happens at night, I am to wait until morning before I tell the others. I am not to send for the preacher or the undertaker. The preacher has a mighty voice in these mountains, but he expects to be paid for his wisdom. And the undertaker, for all of his hushed, liquid speakings of how paltry his tariff will be, can be ill-humored and short-tempered when the time comes to divvy up, as we found out in the case of Cosby Luther, my maternal parent, who died of the fever 4 years ago. So it is that Roy Luther has requisitioned me to give him a simple, homemade burial when the time comes. After I am sure his heart and breathing have stopped, I am to wrap him in an old clean sheet and take him to his final resting place, which will be within a stand of black spruce up on old Joshua. We have not talked about how I am to get him there. Were you to ask Roy Luther, it would only shame him to have to say aloud that we'll have to put him in Romy's wagon, and he'd have to say, "What for me to do?" with the feet, which will surely drag, because the vehicle is just but a toy. I am worried about Roy Luther dying and how I am to get him decently and honorably buried, but more than that, I am worried about the other responsibilities he has charged me with, the other promises he has wrung from me. Number 1, I am always to take pride in having the name of Luther, and to instill this pride in the others too. Number 2, I am to strive with everything in me to keep our family together and not ever take charity from anybody, even if our tongues hang out parched down to our knees, because charity is seldom of real service to those upon whom it is bestowed, and those who receive it are always looked upon with suspicion. Every need and want is scrutinized. Number 3, I am to keep Devola with me always. I am to be good and kind and loving to her, and see to it that the others are too. I am not to let her to marry Kaiser Pease. If ever it looks to me like this is about to happen, then I'm to go to town and find the nearest judge and tell him about how Devola is and get him to stop it. On my word of highest honor, I have promised Roy Luther all of these things. Just how I am to bring them about I do not know, nor does he. Never a strong man or one able to think things out, he spends now most of his waking hours in his porch chair. The valley is there before him, big and rich and abundant, but he doesn't see it anymore. The worms, or whatever it is that started the sickness in him, have taken all the caring out of him. 3 or 4 times a day I ask him if he doesn't want me to doctor him, and he always says yes, and I fetch the bottle of turpentine, and I smear a good amount of that stuff around on the base of his throat where he says the worms are the most active. It is a futile action, and we both know it, but when it's finished, Roy Luther leans back and he closes his eyes, and he says he feels better. He has let things beat him, Roy Luther has. The land, Kaiser Pease, the poverty, now he's old and sick, and he's ready to die, and when he does, this is what we'll inherit. We'll inherit his defeat and all that goes with it. Sometimes when I look at him, I am stirred to an unholy anger. I think, God help me. Roy Luther, I don't want you dead, and that's the truth. But since it's going to happen anyway, I wish it would just hurry up and be over with, for it's pulling us all to pieces. And I need to get on with things and try to fix them around so that life will be easier for those of us who are left. And then I get scared, and I think, but how am I going to do this? Who will show me how, and who will help me? And then I get madder, and I say to myself, just quit your belly aching. There's a way. All you have to do is find it. Of those witch hazel leaves weighed a pound apiece. I only wish. Going home, I expressed this wry wish to Devola, but she just smiled and said she was hungry. We are mountain people, so we eat mountain food. Liver mush and fried cabbage and cranberry beans cooked to a nutty goodness with slabs of thick back fat. Devola is good about the cooking, and Emmeline and Romy are good about eating what's set before them. They don't whine when I tell them that there's nothing to sweeten the end of a plain meal. Emmeline just softly draws in her breath and says, well, maybe tomorrow. And with a manly look, Romy says, I wasn't even thinking about anything sweet. I was thinking about those mountains, how old they are. Do you know, Mary Call? How old are the Great Smoky Mountains? 100 years? 2? Why can't I have some books so I can find out the answers to a few things? So I wouldn't have to stand here shamed in front of this child and admit to him that I don't know how old the Great Smoky Mountains are. Romy is looking at me, and he says, it's all right, Mary Call. Don't fret yourself about it. I'll find out sometime. It's not all right with me not to know this. I need to correct my ignorance. I need so many things. And that is the end of chapter 1.